my process and I think my purpose there is to go and look at what's feasible and how long is that going to take, and then to push back with the facts that I can find and ask questions about the things that I don't know.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And I don't know what that was during my intro, but I just plowed through it, because
Josh is the quiet professional. He took that out real quick.
Yeah. Well, and
I'm getting some thunder rolling in around here, so I think.
Oh, is that what it is? Oh, yeah, those
Mother
Houstonian
Nature's amazing.
storms. Yeah, well, if that lightning bolt comes striking down, folks, you saw it here first. That's all I got to say. Make sure you hit the like and comment button on it when Josh hits that lightning strike. Don't know what he's been doing up until this moment, but it's always good to have a brother from the regiment on. Camden, do you remember what that means?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I do.
All right, good. So, Josh, man.
See, the lesson there, folks, is I answered that with confidence, and he didn't ask me what it was.
So
There's
true.
your life lesson right there.
So true. Oh, and those of you watching us on the YouTube will notice that our special guest associate producer is joining us once again, Mrs. Clementina, not Mrs. Ms. Clementina. She is.
Give her a wave. There we go.
Yep, she is ready to go and super excited to get into it with our brother Josh, who, even though I've asked him this 100 times, I think I refuse to believe the reasoning behind it. But how in the world did you step into the cyber world based on your SF background? Because those two don't compete or
connect.
There you go.
Those two dots don't connect.
Yeah, they don't.
There you go.
Yeah, they don't. And maybe if you're an Echo, we've actually got one of those guys on my team. But for me, it was who I know. I was actually doing similar to what you guys are doing, leadership consulting 7-8 years ago, and ran into the founder of this company when he was running his MSP. So he had put on Facebook.
MSP. Got it.
Yeah, managed service provider, a regular IT company that's not as specialized as this one is in cyber. So he had put on Facebook he was looking for another veteran to help with sales. I said, hey, I know a lot of veterans in the nonprofit sphere. Give me the job description. I'll help you out. We kicked that can for about 30 days, and he asked if I could, do a few hours a week and remotely just try and open some doors and help him get them started. And I agreed to do that, and we ended up partnering, and now I run the business side. So I've got a dangerous mouth when it comes to cyber, but I ain't touching your keyboard, Otis. I'll break your stuff.
So was it the sales aspect that caused you two to join up, or was it what our friend golly, he and I were just smoking cigars the other night. Our friend Chris is a good friend. Chris Messina has a business called Quark, which is a partner analysis tool. Really, you're welcome, Chris, for that shout out, brother. But you might have done the true relationship development and come up with that. Was that what really happened in that? Hey, we like each other, get along, compliment each other. Let's do something.
Yeah, I think initially it was just help a buddy out. Jason and I are both veterans. We had worked together before. When I came in to do a little consulting for him, it was to develop a little bit of his sales team, but really that cultural aspect, how do we get buy-in, was kind of the challenge he was facing. So we've been like-minded and kept in touch for a little while. And I think that lean-in approach was really good. We didn't start off with let's be partners. It was just, hey, I'll help you out, open some doors. Things got rolling. And so it was a couple of different levels of progression before we ended up as full-fledged partners, and I started taken over more of the operational aspect of the business. I still do a lot of sales because we're still very new, but I develop the teams, do the hiring, firing, training, things like that.
How did you come up with your approach on the technical side? Because, like you said, you'll break the keyboard. You don't want to mess with that, but you're still in the space. I'm always interested how you kind of walk that line between the two.
Well, I mean, coming from the regiment, right, I understand security as a whole, like the strategic need. So it was really taking that and overlaying it on what are the digital pieces to this. Um, and a lot of what our firm does is the paperwork side of cyber. So most folks don't realize that there's a lot of policies, training, procedures that need to be put in place for the people of the organization that's then backed up by the technology. So it was like any other job, right? Get into it and start learning. Jason's written a couple of books, so I read them things, started getting on a bunch of blogs, diving into our marketing sheets, and just doing a ton of different research. And YouTube University is pretty helpful to go look up some of the number one and number two ethical hackers out there and learn from them. And then I just go back to Jason and ask questions, and still learning. Absolutely, still learning.
Go ahead, Cam. And
No, it was Herb. I was talking, but I did have one there. So I was going to ask with that. How do you feel with a little bit more of the, I guess, the imposter syndrome side of that? I always think it's interesting when you're in that kind of a field and maybe a little bit more of the bootstrap, the YouTube University, as you put it, and kind of piecing together that stuff. Then sometimes you meet the folks who've been doing that thing their whole freaking life, and it can feel kind of weird, like you're that outsider there. That outsider perspective is powerful, but you got to fight through that imposter syndrome to still be in that room. Could you talk a little bit about your perspective with that?
Well, for me, I don't really have any imposter syndrome. I'm really transparent. I'm not going to touch your keyboard. I'm not on the service and delivery side of the house. And I'm partnered with a guy who's got 30 years of experience doing this and every certification known to man in the cyber field. So when it comes to our core competency as a business, we're very well rounded. And my education is in entrepreneurship. And so this is not my first rodeo with starting a business. So on that side of the house, I feel pretty comfortable with where I'm at.
Love that.
so you touched on it just a little bit, but I'd like for you to get into this a bit more. And that is, how'd y'all differentiate your roles? Because and draw that responsible line. I'll just leave it from there because I know I got about 10 follow-ups on that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm the number two, and I'm happy to do that. Jason's the one that stood this thing up. It's his vision. If you read the book Traction, I'm the operator in the house. My job is to make it happen and glue all the pieces together. His job is to drive the ship and let us know what we need based on his experience in the market and what he's seeing from a service and delivery side of the house.
That thunder is distracting sometimes, ain't it?
I apologize.
No.
It just started too.
I think it's classic. It's classic summertime Houston weather. I mean, that's why, folks, you do not fly through Houston during the summertime unless it's early morning. So
Who's going to be more distracted? You by his thunder, Josh by your own thunder, or me by Clementine here? Because I think we are. This is the ADHD episode over here.
Yep, it just might be. How do you, when you sit down? Because I'm going to dissect some business thoughts on this. How do y'all do? Let's say a 5-year plan. What's y'all's approach for doing that? Sitting down and coming up with that.
So we looked at 2 end states. I mean, our goal is to exit this company in 10 years or less. But whether we exit at a $10 million valuation or $100 million kind of bifurcates around year 3 or 4. So we're building out a couple of different roadmaps based on that bifurcation. But for now, it's get to a 7-figure business, right? So we spend probably 90% of our time on the tactics of the quarter or the week. And once we hit that benchmark, we'll really start diving into the machinery that'll be needed for either one of those roadmaps.
So you mentioned that Jason was the vision creator, which was, ding, 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 right answer. It was his idea. It's his vision. But how do you put yourself into that role of partnership and dealing with that and seeing that vision?
Yeah, I think I'm the execution side of the mission, right? So when Jason comes and says this is the direction we want to go, my process and I think my purpose there is to go and look at what's feasible and how long is that going to take, and then to push back with the facts that I can find and ask questions about the things that I don't know. So we've adjusted the vision based on the reality of the landscape and what we've been able to uncover. And then from an operations perspective, to try and create as many feedback loops as we can without bogging down the front-facing, action items of the day. And that way we can learn as we go. I know we've evolved maybe a dozen times since we've opened our doors, and we haven't been open even 2 years yet. It's just the nature of the beast when you're getting going.
What's your kind of rules of thumb with that? Because I think that's an interesting question. We have a lot of entrepreneurs of the part of the attraction of entrepreneurship is the lack of bureaucracy, lack of the systems and all that. But then also obviously you need to build all those things in to keep the business flowing. How do you go about kind of, like I said, maybe some rules of thumb as you look at that of hey, how often do we need to be having these meetings? How many of these things can we cut back? All that kind of stuff there.
Yeah, I start and end with the sales funnel. If the top of the funnel's full and we've got enough stuff moving forward, closing, and that pace is kind of keeping up, then I look at what time is left to attack systems and operations. And if there's things like gaps, is it the speed to close? Do we have a follow-up problem? Do we have a lead generation problem? Where do I see funnels? And inside that process, and how do I widen that up? Right. So I try to go in and look at one specific thing to work on and then build the team. Right. So there's a lot of training that needs to happen. But a lot of what we do is OJT. I'm going to give you what you need for the day. Go do it, learn, and I expect 20 questions throughout the day. Right. And that keeps everybody moving because Jason and I still do probably most of the sales work. We've got a sales guy that does a lot of lead generation, but it takes a while to learn all of these things to where he can really work the middle of the funnel and nurture a client, answer questions effectively and things like that. So it's bit by bit and starting in with the sales funnel so that we don't lose track of the revenue of the business because that's where the health comes from. Right?
Do you try to select and build the team for folks that kind of fit into that, on the job training like you're talking about, and kind of, Dad, we talk about in the rugby world of it's you only got to be 1 week ahead of the team you're coaching, and as long as I know what we're doing next week, we're okay for this week, all that kind of stuff. It can be stressful on the team sometimes. You have to kind of shield them a bit on that. Do you select folks who are more comfortable with that, or what's your process for shielding them from that little bit of chaos that's natural with it? Because I love that process, but some folks ain't cut out for it.
I would argue that most folks are not cut out for that. Most folks want a very clearly defined role that meets the training that they've had before. So we hire specifically on culture. Our process is Jason does the first scrub of any resume that comes through the door. That way the captain of the ship has a thumbs up first. Then we send them a questionnaire that follows the ideal team player, as well as a couple other questions like what's your purpose, where do you want to be in 5 years, things like that. If they pass those two things, I do the first interview that's kind of broad scope. Make sure that the buy-in is there, make sure that everything from the questionnaire and the resume lines up. Then they go to our marketing and ops guys, and they really put on their former police officers and PSYOP guys. So they put on, the white light and start drilling down to see if there's any gaps in what we've been told, to figure out if people are lying. If they pass those 2 rounds of interviews, they go to Jason for a technical proficiency. And that's our process. But all of that, the center of all of that is culture. Are you ready to get on the bus? If I hand you a bag of dirt and tell you to go win the war, will you say yes and go try?
Though,
So define your culture for us.
Service. We are of service to the people that are our customers, to each other, to our families. You have to be of service and willing to put other people before yourself.
what I was going to ask is, you talk about the kind of finding those gaps in the towards the end of the interview process, and like, okay, hey, what are they telling us? What do they really mean, and all those kind of things. I think that's really interesting. My question is, do you feel that by selecting for culture, you prevent some of that? Like by focusing there, you tend to root out a lot of that BS earlier on, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll root it out in the interview, and my guys will kind of double down. So one thing from the ideal team player that I found really, really helpful was you should not have siloed interviewees and interviewers. So in between each interview, we are talking to each other about what we found, what we want to drill in on, and we're rating them. So in the ideal team player, you get 6 questions per category on whether you're hungry, humble, and people smart. And so we rate them based on what we see against what they rated themselves, and then drill down on the ambiguities, right? And that way we get a lot of clarity on whether they're being authentic, honest, and whether or not they know themselves.
What's your projection? So one of the things that I always work with my clients on is when you're looking out to establish, a timeline. What for hiring? What kind of timeline do y'all look out ahead for indicators that you need to start working towards hiring, a new manager, a new PM, whatever those titles may be?
So management will be a while before we need to hire that. Jason and I can pretty much handle the 2 teams. I mean, the sales facing side and the service and delivery side. So what we do is we look at the workload, because salespeople and cyber analysts and cyber techs are really the 2 places that we scale initially. We've already got our operations and our marketing guys here to grow the business and help scale things. So it's a function of revenue is what we really identified. Once we hit probably that $2 million in annual recurring revenue, then we can look at the compartmentalization with service and delivery, and we can look at kind of segmenting the sales force based on their function. But for now, you just got to get in, start at the start, and go as fast as you can. If you can keep up with Jason on the service and delivery side or keep up with my chaos, you're crushing it.
So let me rephrase that and maybe give you an example from me working with my clients. I always challenge them to, depending on the level of responsibility you're going to need to fulfill, a minimum of 90 days before you start the process, so that when you get to that point, we're not in a panic hire that we're burning out the team and people are quitting because we haven't hired people, but we need to hire people. And then we finally start the process. So that's what if you could share, maybe not just timeline, but what are some business indicators that you and Jason use or wanting to use looking ahead that says this threat, you mentioned 2 million in revenue, do X, Y, Z. Okay. Well, what other things might there be that, helping out other small businesses as they start to get to that point?
Yeah, so we track the hours on the service and delivery side, and we track the effectiveness on the sales side. How many meetings are you scheduling? How many events are you going to? How many cold calls are you making? How many emails are you sending? So I'm able to look at that data twice a week with my sales guys, and from there determine their effectiveness and whether or not we need more salespeople. But ultimately, it goes back to revenue. If I can't afford it, then we just work the efficiency instead of going and buying more manpower. And I'll say until we hit 2 million, there's going to be some chaos. So having that hiring process put into place and having a solid social media presence helps us, because we've got people knocking on our door wanting to join our team because of our culture, and we can streamline that process and get somebody up and running within 30 days from I just sent a resume to you are trained enough to start.
I would love, because actually it's about what I was about going to ask my follow up question. Kind of zooming out a little bit less, Josh, from like what y'all are literally doing to a little bit more of the philosophical different approaches here. Because a lot of folks will talk about, and I think this is about the kind of school of thought you're in. I'm sure there's nuances to it, but basically the idea of we have to grow to the point where we have so much stress. Shh, all right, baby girl. You have to grow to a certain point where we have so much stress and this position is completely needed. And then we hire and they come in and they put out that fire. Versus a lot of people will tell you, sometimes you're limiting yourself by not taking enough risk with the new hire, growing the team a little faster, bringing on somebody new, bring on the new salesperson who can really jumpstart things, and you can speed up the process with that. What do you make of those kind of two schools of thought there?
I mean, have a plan for both contingencies, right? Otis and I know a PACE plan goes with everything. So, we've got 3 different ways that people come in. We've got an internship program that's unpaid. So it's kind of our selection program. If you really want to learn, we'll give you an email address and you better do something impressive in 30 days. We'll give you access. We'll, put you on meetings, that kind of thing. And then from there, provided that they've got stuff going on, we'll put them on a part-time, usually a 1099 part-time. Let them start working some stuff, see what they can really deliver on, and we'll pay for a certification or 2 so that they can plus up and get ready to go. And then we do full-time hires. So most of our accounts that we bring on are smaller, right? Small to medium-sized businesses. So none of those accounts will create an inflection point to where we need a hire to manage this right now. But some partnerships with larger MSPs or bigger clients, we do spend about 20% of our time chasing those things down. When one of those hits, we've got a process in place, and Jason and I will be the 2 that are overworked until the hire comes on to relieve pressure. But we've got a couple of part-time people that we could bring up to full-time as well. So we try to put several pieces that we can pour gas on in different ways so that it allows us some flexibility with what we're doing.
I love that. That's the masterclass of, hey, there's these 2 schools of thought here. They both make sense. Well, yeah, you could use them both at different times. That's exactly right. I love that.
So one of the things I think that I've always felt is one of your strengths, Josh, is your data analysis. And I think that's an important fact. We had our buddy, Jason, a different Jason, I'm pretty sure, Jason Miller. And
I don't know. Jason's got a lot going on. Our Jason.
Yeah. his secret life in Houston is what he's
secret
got.
45th business. Yeah.
So one of his amazing strengths is his ability to collect data and then make that decision. What you mentioned earlier about the gaps in processes and analysis. It's one thing to create a process. It's another thing to analyze it and look for ways that it's broken or it's great or it can be improved or whatever. How are you collecting the data to reflect on, or I'll let you just describe that, how you're doing that?
Yeah, I think the first piece of data is just with our CRM, right? It tracks activities, it tracks where the deal flow is. And so kind of dialing that in and standardizing it so that the data is actually readable and usable was first. From there, when we attack
this is when it was just you and Jason, that part, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and when we first started, we put things into the CRM, but for the most part, we would just discuss what was in the deal flow, right? Mm-hmm. And as we've grown, okay, now we need a standardization and labeling. We need automation and activity generation, things like that. And then I make my sales guys pull out their personal data that's not necessarily in the CRM in a spreadsheet so that they have to review it and they're able to explain it, give me context when I review it with them, and then we go back into the CRM for what needs to be done from the operational perspective. And then gathering good data is also a function of cash, right? There are plenty of good platforms out there, especially for social media and sales, that will gather a lot better, more useful data for us. But the question is, what is the best spent dollar right now? Is that in A marketing opportunity like a conference? Is that in a training program for salespeople or service and delivery or certification? Yada, yada, yada. So strategically, we look at where is the dollar best spent. And then tactically, we identify whatever gap that is and never focus on fixing it. We focus on improving it. So we go in, look at what's being done, try and attack the data capture, try and improve the process so we can improve the overall result, and then leave that be and go attack the next pain point. And again, that gives us some flexibility to move quickly because that's really our only advantage against bigger players that are more embedded in this space.
What do you think is the key to finding the right pieces of data to pay attention to? Like with my rugby coaching, stats are great, but if you're looking at a sheet of stats and you don't know what you're trying to measure, you don't know what you're going to do with that number and how you're going to implement it, then you're just looking at sheet of stats. And it's interesting as a coach, but it doesn't really do that much for the team always. You have to make sure you're picking those right categories to pay attention to and measuring them. What do you think is the key in a business to make sure you're picking the right things versus the superficial data?
Well, I guess I have a three-step process or three lenses in the way that I view that. First, follow the money, right? Money's not going to lie. And that's the ultimate goal of the business is to generate cash. So that's what I look at first. From there, I go to the experts. I'll go to YouTube University, phone a friend, right? Pick up the phone and call somebody that knows this stuff really well and ask them what they think. And from there, we were able to dial in. And then once we're kind of in the bucket we want to attack, it's a lot of guess and check, right? You've got to try some things. There's a lot of great advice out there, but unless you try it for your business, you're not going to know. So the trick for us is to fail really fast. If we decide we want to try something, we want to try it today. We want to have the analytics reviewed by the end of the week, and we want to have the improvement solidified by the end of the month.
Yeah, that's great, and I like the phrase "guess and check." What's something that you struggled with? You're like, I'm thinking, maybe it was you said, no, this is I know this is going to work. Let's give it another week, month, whatever. And Jason's like, or vice versa. Can you walk us through something along those lines?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is trying to figure out how much time something needs to really figure out if it's going to work. So we've changed our target market and our messaging a couple of times, depending on what we've seen work in the managed service provider space, what we see work in the SaaS space, and so like our MSP partnership program is a great example of this. So we partner with your general IT service company because they typically don't do what we do, but they are the trusted advisor that gets the phone call. Because as you said earlier, Otis, right? If they touch a computer, then everybody just thinks that they do all this stuff, and that's normal.
Thank you. Yes, that's normal.
It's absolutely normal. So what we really needed to do was be patient because when we bolt on, there's the kind of the courting period to make sure that we're comfortable. Then there's deal identification. Then there's full service integration. Then there's marketing opportunities. And then there's sales and closings, conversations and things like that, right? So it's an 18-month process to really flesh that out and get it moving as a partnership program, at least. And we continue to dial that in. Who's effective? How often do we need to talk? Do we have quotes out? Are they working the deals? Essentially, as a partner, are they doing their own push-ups? Are they expecting us to do the workout for them? Because we're not doing that, right? I can give you all the ammo for your gun, but you got to go fire it downrange. And then from a business perspective, when you really step back and look at that partnership program, it's working and it's good, but we still have to go direct to market because otherwise we'll be crushed for cash flow based on how long those things take, right? So that was a hard lesson for us to learn because we wanted to shift too quickly, and we made some really fast and good shifts in the beginning when we were targeting CPAs and law firms pretty heavily, and realized that it's not enough of a pain for those two industries to really understand what we're doing unless it comes from their IT provider, right? So we shifted to more of a mid market.
What was could you give us, you know, because I think this is such a key lesson for businesses. What was something that happened, or was it just that things were just kind of slowly sinking? Was it a smack upside the head from a trusted advisor, or what?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we found was when we were going direct to market, we'd find hot leads where something had happened. Either they had a breach, or they knew that they had been hacked, or maybe they had ransomed. Something happened. And so they were like, we need your help. We'd come in, start an engagement, and the business owner would bring us to the table, and then they would call their IT provider. And that IT provider would view us as a threat. And it
Mm-hmm.
didn't matter what we said. We don't do what you do. We want to help, right? And they thought that we were going to pull the sheets off of them and show them all the ugliness behind the network. And so they would torpedo the conversation. Oh, we got it. Oh, we'll fix it. Give heavy discount. Whatever they had to do to get us out of the room. So we figured we'd flip that on its head and go straight to the MSP provider, do the work for them so they didn't have to, and still allow them to catch the revenue.
Could you talk some about how you were able to not only kind of change the perspective on the problem, but also show how big of a problem is? You know, Dad, we joke about all the time in the leadership space that it's like we're over here talking about physical therapy. People just want to wait to get some surgery when they blow out their back. There's a lot of the times at businesses, people don't want to treat the problems until it gets really, really big. They can save so much by hitting things early. I'm sure you get in those same kind of conversations all the time. What's your approach to helping them to see that it's worth getting into that problem set now?
Well, it's kind of a two-pronged approach depending on what the pain is. We do cyber compliance. So in order for the government to protect our economy and our infrastructure, they have to require businesses to do certain things. And insurance is the enforcement arm of that for the most part. That pain is commonly felt. And the MSPs are the ones getting the call for that business, and they can't do it, or they don't want to do it. So that's pretty sticky if there's things like that going on. Beside that, our best referral partner is cyber insurance brokers, because they're the ones that get a call when one of their clients who has a GNL policy experiences an event, says, we need cyber insurance because I don't want to fork out $500,000 again, and they don't qualify. So then we get called to get everything in order so that they can qualify for the right insurance policy, and then harden their systems and provide some resiliency training for their people.
So when you analyze these problem sets, it's is it a data thing? I mean, are you actually able to collect some data, or is it still I'm looking at something and I see it just doesn't feel right? What's your gut? Because, I know you well enough, but I can tell you in the 30 minutes we've been chatting, you sound like numbers. It's like, just show me data, dude. Just show me data. But I also know that's not really who you are. So how are you weighing those decisions, data versus gut?
I think data is a backstop for me, right? The numbers will either confirm or deny your assumptions, but almost every intuition is conversational based, right? How did it feel? What information did you get? And like regarding the sales process, I just flat out ask, do you care? Because if you don't care, you're not going to open up your pocketbook, and that's fine. I don't want to waste your time, right? But if you do care and you're willing to allocate a serious budget to this, then we can make a lot of improvement, and I can show you the dollars and risk that you avoided. But it's all about people. I mean, sales, team building, everything. People run businesses, right? The AI overlords have not taken over yet. And
Although the Chinese were playing soccer with their robots the other day.
I saw
I
that.
know it. I know it. So, yeah, I think that a lot of it is conversational. Talking to a million people a week, and then coming back to the team and talking about what's the feel, right? And then let's go to the data and see whether or not we're close, or even if we have data on what we're feeling. That's how we identify gaps in the data that we're gathering a lot is, well, okay, we feel like the sales process is moving a little slow. Okay, how long does it take? Well, I don't know. We've got a little bit of analytics. Well, what was the follow-up process for all these different accounts? What's the difference between the ones that closed and the ones that didn't? Right? And you start asking those questions based on the feel and what we're seeing from a conversational basis, and then we go grab the data to see what's what.
I'm curious. We've talked about this before on the show. Whenever you get into data versus like the human side of things, there's always this really interesting attempt that it's like if I just understand the human side really well and get into psychology, behavioral science, all this, and then understand the data really well, eventually there's some connecting point there, and they both actually come together. I would love to hear your perspective on that because the all the data, all the numbers, all that kind of stuff, there's still the intuition at the end of the day. There's still just a person over there that you're kind of just seeing what you feel about with them in that conversation. What's your perspective on trying to connect those two dots, or are they really unconnectable in that way?
I think they're connectable. I don't think that it's black and white. I think it's intersecting sectors of fire, right? I think that the data on one side and the feel part of it, the conversational part of it on the other, you just start getting them closer, and you'll see the correct action when they really start to interlink. But that then the next step for that is to realize that you're shooting at a moving target, right? What works this month or this quarter or this year is going to change a little bit, and so we're constantly going to have to adjust. But if you can get those things close, you can keep them. It's quicker to adjust as the target changes a little bit. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good way of putting it. What do you think is the key to recognizing those different situations then? And kind of taking that into application, because what you just said there is a beautiful philosophical answer, and I'm with you on that. But what's the nugget, the rule of thumb to pass out to folks out there?
I mean, the action item is put time on your calendar to work on your business instead of work in your business, so that you can actually take a step back and ask questions about the processes that you're currently using. If you don't do that, then everybody ends up siloed with their own perspective of tunnel vision, and there is no mass improvement, right? It's all tactical. You're not steering a boat at that point. You're just shooting off the side of it.
Love that. So, do you have one on that, Dad? Because I was going to change subjects.
Mine was a change of subject, so.
All right, so I'm going first then.
Yeah.
So earlier you were talking about, Josh, that going into the business, you knew your goal was to exit. You mentioned 10 years or sooner. I would love to hear your perspective in the business right now. Not that you already sold a success story, but right now, what kind of impact do you think that piece of the vision has had on your I was going to say success, but just your day to day, the way that the job feels to you? Does it really make that impact that all these folks talk about having the end in mind and all those kind of things? Give us the insider scoop.
I think you have to have the end in mind in order to get where you want to go, right? It's part of the planning process. I haven't found a planning process other than reverse planning that's really effective.
Yeah.
As far as how it affects my day to day, not at all. I know what I need to do, and I'm in entrepreneurship because I'm fortunate enough to pick who I want to work with, and I like solving problems. I could care less about the money. It's just a scoreboard, right? It's a measure of whether or not we're doing the right thing. Do I want to exit for millions of dollars and be able to provide a legacy for my family? Absolutely. If that doesn't happen, will it change one piece of the relationship with my family? Absolutely not.
The other piece of that, talking about the exiting of the business, that comes to mind is the purpose side of the vision. I think we've said this before, Dad, we talk about, it's like, look, if you're selling it to the right folks and they're going to go keep working on that thing, there's not really, you're making a bigger impact. It fits into the big picture like that. What's your thought on the impact side, the purpose side of that exit, and how that fits into the vision?
Well, my purpose is to love God and love people. And if I can provide something valuable and help them protect themselves, then I think that's what I was put here to do. I mean, that's part of what we did in the regiment. Now I found the ability to do that in the marketplace and still make time for my faith and my family. Right? I couldn't ask for anything more, Cam. I really couldn't.
I love that.
So, um, new customers versus clients. How do y'all balance that work ethic, if you will?
Well, I stay focused on incoming, um, at top of the funnel, and Jason stays focused on the bottom of the funnel. Right. So his job is service delivery and retention. My job is new business. He helps close. Right. He is the technical person that everybody needs to talk to when they get ready for that kind of thing. But I'm the one spending a lot of time making new networking connections, generating new leads, having the middle of the funnel type of conversations, looking at the data behind that to make sure that he's got hits coming in, right? But that's where we kind of divide and conquer. We have a lot of overlap in the middle to cover down for each other, but I think that's more cross training and leaning on each other than it is um, our roles.
Mm-hmm. How do you? That just made me think of something. Cross training, one of my favorite subjects for business. How do y'all handle that across the company?
Well, we make sure we have at least one team meeting a week just to go over high level stuff. And then I try to use buddy teams when possible for projects, even if that means sales and operations or sales and service and delivery, whatever it is. Use a buddy team so there's two perspectives and it breeds a little bit of competition. Other than that, we haven't really gotten big enough yet to where like the sales department is cross training each other just because we don't have a whole department yet, right? Once we get there, then we're going to start with right seat, left seats. We're going to start with training programs depending on the role and where you're at for career progression. And then some of that will be peppered in with if you're a sales guy, you need some technical training so you can have that conversation and understand what this is like. You need to go sit in on service and delivery meetings so you understand what that's going to be like so you can convey it, and vice versa. If you're on the technical side, you need to go sit in with some of the sales folks, some of the operations folks, so that you understand what's being promised of you when you get there, right? Um, I think ultimately client expectations is what's going to drive all of that cross training to make sure that the expectations are stay the same the entire time and are met the entire time.
Talking about cross training reminds me of one of the tools we help our clients out with work-ons. The complaint you kind of hear with those type of things is well, Josh, I have to do my job. I can't go over there and I don't need to mess with that. I got so much going on over here. How do you help those people in your team to break outside of that whirlwind and create that time? Because like personally, it's like I always love we'll put the time on there and then see if the building burns down, then yeah, don't put the time on next day. We can make the lesson from there. But there's a certain point where you feel like you're stuck in it and you have to kind of rip that Band-Aid off to add things like this in that are so important. What's your process there?
Well, as management, it's our job to get a lot of feedback and find out if the cross training that we're doing is actually worthwhile. So I've got to listen. Regarding the excuse of that ain't my job, my response would be your job is to be a member of a team, which means you have to interact and learn from the team. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're not willing to do this job.
I
Love it.
I want to circle back because you mentioned something, a phrase you used. Do you care? And asking to a lead in the funnel, I think is probably the best way to describe it. What's the reaction you've seen or gotten when you ask that question?
Almost everybody says yes initially. And then I follow up with, okay, how much money are you willing to put behind that I care? Right? Because that's spending money is going to cause you pain. So you have to be able to spend money that where the pain supersedes the money you spent. And it can't be by 30%. It needs to be 5 to 10x, because then we're really talking about the value we deliver, and you're not shopping on price. Anybody that comes to us and shops on price, I get it. If you got to shop on price, that's fine, but we need to stop talking. And if you get into a situation where you shopped on price and you ended up in a hole, call me. Right? I'm not going anywhere. We'll help you solve our problem. The price is still going to be the price, but your pain isn't big enough yet for you to understand the value of our service, and that's okay.
And I think that's that's a natural thing in business. I mean, I'd do that. I'm like, oh, because not many businesses other than Amazon post the price on what you're buying, right? So you got to talk to the guy and say, okay, well, Josh, I've got this cyber thing that I'm supposed to take care of. Yeah, that's really important, and I really do care because I want to bid on this contract and blah 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 blah. So what's it going to cost? And you say it, and it's like, ooh, okay, maybe I don't bid on that contract. Sort of thing.
And that's what's funny about and what you do, Josh, is there's this kind of funny thing where it's like people aren't going to have a price tag in their head. It's the whole Freakonomics thing of how many times we bought a gallon of milk. You know what a gallon of milk should cost. You go in, you're not getting shocked by the sticker or anything like that. But then with these type of services, there's almost that like there's no point of reference for anything. How do you go about giving them to help frame that value and to frame or I guess not frame the value, of course, but frame the cost also?
Well, I would say 80% of the things that we do are not a one size fits all. So I've got at least one questionnaire and a bunch of bullet questions in an email that you got to answer for me to even put a price to it, right? I'm not going to overcharge you, but I'm gonna charge you what's fair, right? I think that the biggest objective that we have is people don't understand how big some of these processes are, right? Everything works. We didn't get hacked. It's the analogy of physical security versus cybersecurity. Physical security, you can see, smell, and touch, right? Hardened locks, alarm systems, guards, all of it. You know it's there. You can see what you paid for. If we're doing our job, you hear from us once a month to talk about strategy, and that's it, right? And so it's conveying that message. That's why the folks that have been hacked, they know. They came in on a Monday and everything was frozen with a message that said send 500 grand in Bitcoin to this account, or you will not get your stuff back. And they had to hire a negotiator and a forensics team, and they didn't have insurance, and they didn't know if they were going to get their stuff back when they sent the money, but they did it anyway. And maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but they're not going through it again. Right? It's the same reason. I think it's a similar. It's very similar to the Second Amendment. If you didn't grow up in a gun culture, if you don't understand your rights, you're not likely to own a gun unless you get mugged or unless somebody robs you. Then you're likely to go learn and spend money on training and understand how to use a weapon. Right? It's the same thing.
I was going to equate it to, God, what do we call that? RAMs, the random acts of anti-terrorism measures or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I put this Jersey barrier in front of the building and I checked every third ID. And you know what? We haven't had a single terrorist attack, at the U.S. Air Force Academy since we've been doing that. Okay, so did that measure actually work? And that's the hard part about what you're doing too. When you talk about cybersecurity, not just the paperwork trail, is the hey, dude, it happened to this guy over here. You can show that. It's almost the teenager aspect. Hear me out on the teenager aspect. Is well, yeah, that happened to Joe, but that would never happen to me. I'll never, my bike will never crash because I'm a good bicyclist. I'm a good driver, that sort of thing. How often do you deal with that kind of a adverse, I guess, roadblock, adversity, pushback, maybe?
Yeah, it's kind of a mentality, right? If that's your mentality, you just unqualified yourself as a customer, right? Plain and simple. When it comes to showing the customers that understood the value in dollars, what we're doing, we look at the statistics in the market of how much is being lost from firms like theirs based on certain incidences that were caused because they didn't have the preventative measures that this client put into place. And now we're able to assign a dollar value. The easy one across the board is that roughly, depending on what you read, roughly 50% of cyber insurance claims do not get paid out. That means if you have insurance, which most people don't, and if you have enough insurance and the right insurance that doesn't have supplements, which even more people don't, if you have all of those things, there's a 50% chance that you will not get paid because you were supposed to do monthly scans and you missed one last year. Or you have a policy in place and not everybody is adhering to it. Whatever the case is, right? And so something like that is, man, you're already paying in premiums, you already did all this work, and you still ain't going to get paid. And if you're a $20 million or less business, good luck affording a $500,000 ransomware attack.
Yeah, that's definitely a risk measure that the leadership team has to determine what they're willing to accept. The probability of occurrence and the effect of the occurrence. Those two things. And folks, if you don't understand what that means, then you need to give us a call, because that's key to some significant decision makings. Is not just because the government tells you that you need car insurance. You need car insurance, and same thing works out here.
That's an interesting piece. I was just going to say that's an interesting piece of the cybersecurity, because as you're talking about that with risk, what almost comes to mind is the conversation you have around like diseases and those kind of things. But it's so abstract, and the possible outcome is so ridiculous that it's like, okay, well then we can't really think about that. But Josh, I think you do a great job of, it's like, no, it's not just everything's gone, it's all terrible. It's like, no, it's a $500,000 ransom. Right there. And it's like this very real, like, hey, this is the impact that you're looking at. And I think that does so much for taking that abstract thing that none of us freaking understand, or Josh probably understands it, or at least Jason does, but takes that really abstract thing and makes it so much more manageable like that.
Yeah, the really interesting thing about hacking and cyber is that the cyber insurance is really the venture capital arm of hackers. 20 years ago, it was a kid in his mom's basement just seeing if he could. 15 years ago, it was, oh, maybe I could get some money out of this. How about $5,000? Maybe 10. And then the insurance companies realized, oh, all right, we have a pain. We could sell some insurance for this. Well, now the hackers are sophisticated. They're going to spend 180 days inside your system before they do anything to recon everything and to include find out what your insurance coverage is. And then that's the ransom they're going to ask for because they know it'll get paid.
Wow.
Well, here's your next metaphor. That's the roofers after a hailstorm. Guess how much it's going to cost to get your roof fixed? What the insurance company is willing to pay.
I was going to say, let's wrap this up so I can go unplug every electronic in my house.
Yep. Of going offline. And that is not what we learned, folks. What we learned, or what I learned, is the guess and check and the fail fast, fail forward, fail often philosophy of, yeah, that looks about right. Let's go and try it. And then did it work? Well, let's check the data. Nope, didn't work. All right, let's try this. It is a little bit more thought out in the category of hold my beer sort of thing, but that's what it boils down to. So that's what I learned. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
I'm having a great perspective moment with her because you were talking in the green room about my last podcast with her, and that was about a month and a half ago, and it was a lot easier. The she's getting freaking heavy and talking and all that kind of stuff, and she getting heavy, and then also not to mention had to lift up a big Persian man a few times this weekend at a wedding. So shout out to Amir Faraji, give him a little plug for that. But it's like, oh my gosh, this is getting tough. So I don't know. She needed to start talking soon so she can just stand and talk to you guys or something. We got to figure something out because this is getting a little heavy on my back.
All right. Josh, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
I think as we were talking about the data and improving processes, one thing I realized was that I don't think that I've tracked, or at least not tracked well, the timing of the improvements. I have a roadmap for it, right? Let's get something executed within a day. Let's track it over a week. Let's solidify it over a month. I don't think that is data from a managerial perspective that I've been tracking effectively. So I'm going to go back and take a hard look at, are we meeting our timelines there?
Awesome. Josh, how do folks find you, connect with you, follow you, and learn more about what y'all got going on?
Well, for our company, Triad Info Sec, that's sec.io, is our website. There's more information on there than you could ever hope to learn. For me, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So LinkedIn.com/Joshua Wathen. If you shoot me a connection with a note, I'm happy to connect, answer questions, and find resources for you. Whether that's cybersecurity, IT, or veteran stuff, right? I'm kind of a informal concierge for veteran everything. So if you need a resource, please reach out. I'll help you out.
Awesome. Josh, man, I'm glad we were finally able to pull this off and get together. Thanks for your time this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, James. This has been a pleasure.
All right, Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Joshua Wathen, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch floods of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. That's the only place you can see Miss Clementine right here also. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass it along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so that they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, that full archive of episodes is available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.